The first sign that something was wrong wasn't the silence of the neighborhood. It was the envelope taped to my front door like a warning. No stamp, no return address, just my name written in thick black marker, pressed hard enough to almost tear through the paper. I remember standing there, keys still in my hand, feeling like I'd just stepped into someone else's story, and not the kind that ends well. I had just bought the house 3 days earlier. It wasn't anything extravagant, but it was mine. After years of saving, grinding, and putting up with landlords who treated repairs like optional favors, I finally had a place I could call home. No shared walls, no noise complaints, no rules. At least that's what I thought. The envelope crinkled as I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, printed, not handwritten. Final notice. Failure to join the HOA will result in legal action and possible eviction. I actually laughed at first. It felt ridiculous. I had reviewed every document before closing. There was no HOA listed anywhere, no fees, no restrictions, nothing. I even called my agent right there on the porch. "Yeah, no HOA," he confirmed casually. "You're good." That should have been the end of it. But then I heard her voice. "You think this is funny?" I turned slowly. Across the street stood a woman in her late 40s, arms crossed, staring at me like I had just committed a personal offense. Perfectly styled hair, oversized sunglasses, and the kind of posture that screamed authority without permission. "You must be the new owner," she said, walking toward me without waiting for an invitation. "I'm Karen, president of the HOA." I held up the paper. "There's no HOA attached to this property." Her lips tightened into something that almost resembled a smile, but colder. "That's not how this neighborhood works." "I checked the paperwork," I replied. "There's no legal obligation." She stepped closer, lowering her voice like she was sharing a secret. "Then you made a very expensive mistake." Something in my chest tightened. "Are you threatening me?" "I'm informing you," she said calmly. "Everyone here is part of the association. Everyone follows the rules. You don't get special treatment." "I'm not asking for special treatment," I shot back. "I'm just not joining something I'm not legally bound to." Her expression hardened completely now. "You will join," she said, "or you won't be here much longer." She turned and walked away before I could respond, like the conversation was already over. I stood there, the paper still in my hand, the weight of her words settling in deeper than I wanted to admit. It sounded absurd, but it didn't feel like a bluff. And that was the moment I realized this wasn't going to be a normal neighborhood dispute. It was going to be a war. The next morning, I woke to the sound of a lawnmower running too close to my property line. Peering out the window, I saw Karen, of course, on a riding mower, trimming every edge with precision that seemed almost personal. She stopped and waved, the kind of polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. That was when I realized this wasn't going to be subtle. Karen wasn't just going to sit back and let me exist peacefully in my own home. She had a plan. I decided to document everything. If this escalated, I needed proof. My phone was full of photos, the welcome letter, the lawn invasions, even the subtle gatherings of neighbors that appeared whenever I stepped outside. Each moment felt staged, calculated, like a silent army was waiting to pressure me into submission. Then came the next blow, a knock at my door. I opened it to find two women, neatly dressed, carrying clipboards. "Good morning," one said, beaming. "We're from the HOA, just here to inspect your property." "I don't have an HOA," I said flatly. "Oh, we know," she replied cheerfully, "but the neighborhood committee wants to make sure everyone is following community standards." The word committee sounded innocent enough, but I knew better. This was Karen's squad. Her eyes followed me as I stepped aside, letting them in. They measured my garden, peeked into my windows, and made notes in their clipboards. I tried to remain polite, even joking about my unintentional law-breaking. But their smiles never wavered. There was no humor here, only strategy. Later that day, I found another letter slipped under my door. This one was bolder, typed in all caps. "Final warning, Failure to comply with HOA regulations will result in legal action. Eviction is possible. That word, eviction, echoed in my mind. I called a lawyer, explaining the situation. He reassured me there was no legal basis for the HOA to force me out. I was protected by my purchase documents. Yet, reassurance did little to calm the growing dread. Karen's determination was clear. If she couldn't legally force me to join, she'd find every other way to make life unbearable. Over the next few days, it escalated further. Flyers were taped to my mailbox. Anonymous complaints showed up on my doorstep. And I noticed neighbors subtly avoiding me, or worse, glaring. Every interaction felt like a test. Every glance, a judgment. It was psychological warfare, and I was now on the front lines. By the end of the week, I realized this wasn't just about a homeowners association. It was about control, power, and Karen's obsession with enforcing her version of order. And that's when the first real confrontation happened. Confrontation that would push me to the edge. It started with a knock that felt heavier than usual, like someone was hammering not just on my door, but on the idea of me existing in that house. I opened it to find Karen, clipboard in hand, flanked by two other neighbors who looked as rigid as statues. Her expression was a mask of civility, but her eyes burned with purpose. "I told you, we need to talk about your HOA membership," she said, her tone sugar-coated but sharp. "It's for the good of the community." "I already explained," I replied, trying to keep my voice calm. "I'm not joining an HOA that doesn't legally cover my property. That's the law." Her smile didn't waver. "You can follow the law, or you can follow the rules of the neighborhood. And believe me, everyone here follows the rules." I felt my chest tighten. "There's no legal requirement, Karen. You can't make me leave my own home." She took a step closer, lowering her voice so only I could hear. "Legally, maybe? Socially? That's another story." I paused. Her words weren't a threat in the official sense, but the implications were clear. Social ostracism, harassment, endless pressure. It was a tactic she clearly knew how to use, and she wasn't subtle about it. Over the next hour, Karen outlined community expectations in meticulous detail. Complaints from neighbors, guidelines for landscaping, and rules about what color I could paint my shutters. Every rule was framed as voluntary, but every sentence carried the weight of intimidation. By the end, I felt cornered, not legally, but emotionally. After they left, I sat on my couch and replayed the confrontation in my mind. Karen wasn't just a concerned neighbor, she was a strategist. Every visit, every letter, every subtle threat was part of a plan to wear me down until I gave in. I knew I had two choices: surrender and join the HOA, or fight back. And deep down, I didn't want to surrender. This house was my hard-earned sanctuary, and no one, especially Karen, was going to bully me out of it. That night, I drafted a response. Not a fiery letter, but a calculated one. I laid out my legal standing, my rights as a homeowner, and my willingness to maintain good relations, but without joining an organization. I wasn't bound to. I had to show strength without inviting retaliation. Little did I know, sending that response was the spark Karen had been waiting for. Because the next morning, things escalated faster than I could have imagined. A chain reaction had begun that would test every ounce of my patience, courage, and sanity. The following days would bring unannounced inspections, exaggerated complaints, and a direct confrontation with the very law she tried to use as a weapon. This was no longer just a fight about HOA membership. It was about survival in my own home. The escalation came quietly at first, almost imperceptibly, but soon it was impossible to ignore. I started noticing small, deliberate disruptions. My trash cans moved to the curb earlier than scheduled, mysterious notes left on my doorstep, and the occasional neighbor casually mentioning that I should reconsider my stance on the HOA. Every act felt coordinated, calculated, and always with Karen at the center. Then one afternoon, I returned from work to find a group of people from the neighborhood standing near my driveway. They claimed to be volunteers checking for compliance with community standards. Their smiles were friendly enough, but the intensity in their eyes told a different story. I realized that Karen had essentially mobilized the neighborhood, turning them into her army of enforcers. "Hi there," one of them said cheerfully. "We just wanted to make sure everything's in order." I smiled tightly. "Everything is fine. I've followed all legal requirements, as you can see." Karen's voice rang out before I could explain further. "We just want what's best for the community. You wouldn't want to stand out, would you?" I clenched my fists. This wasn't concern, it was intimidation. Her ability to manipulate people around her was extraordinary. I could feel the tension in the air, thick enough to cut with a knife. I wanted to say something, but I knew any wrong word could escalate the situation further. That night, I decided to call a lawyer again. This time, I wanted advice on how to protect myself from harassment, not just legal overreach. He reassured me that harassment laws were on my side, but the caveat was clear. I would need documentation. Every visit, every note, every verbal threat, everything had to be logged. So I did. I photographed the notes, recorded conversations where legally permissible, and kept a detailed journal. Each entry was a testament to Karen's obsession with control. I realized that she wasn't just trying to make me join the HOA, she wanted to break me down entirely. A week later, the tension reached a boiling point. Karen appeared at my door, this time with a property management inspector I didn't know existed. Their inspection was invasive, under the guise of community maintenance, but it felt more like an interrogation. Every corner of my house was scrutinized, every detail noted. I confronted her firmly. "This isn't legal. You cannot force me to comply with anything I'm not obligated to follow." Karen's eyes narrowed. "We'll see about that. People who resist don't last long here." That statement lingered in my mind long after she left. It wasn't a legal threat. It wasn't even a formal complaint. It was a promise, and I had a sinking feeling she intended to make good on it. By now, I realized one undeniable truth. If I wanted to survive in my home, I couldn't just defend myself. I had to fight strategically. Karen had turned a neighborhood into her battlefield, and I was the enemy she refused to negotiate with. The next confrontation would be the one that tested me most, legally, emotionally, and mentally. By the time the final confrontation arrived, I felt like I had been living in a pressure cooker for weeks. Karen's harassment had escalated to near-constant inspections, unsolicited complaints to city officials, and a network of neighbors who seemed to report every minor action I took. Every knock at the door, every passing glance, carried the weight of her presence. But I wasn't going to back down. Not now, not ever. I scheduled a formal meeting with a lawyer, bringing every piece of documentation I had collected, letters, photographs, logs of encounters, and even recordings where legally allowed. The lawyer laid out a plan. We would respond to each complaint, enforce my rights, and make it crystal clear that any attempt to evict me or pressure me into an HOA, membership without legal grounds would be met with immediate action. Then the day came. Karen arrived, flanked by a group of neighbors, armed with another inspection notice. I opened the door, took a deep breath, and met her gaze without flinching. "This is the last time I will entertain these visits," I said calmly. "I am not part of your HOA, and you have no legal authority over me. Any further harassment will be addressed through legal channels." Karen smirked, but I noticed a flicker of hesitation. For the first time, she realized I wasn't afraid. I wasn't going to crumble under her orchestrated intimidation. The power dynamic had shifted. The standoff lasted only minutes, but it was decisive. Karen left, and this time, I didn't hear the muffled whispers of neighbors following her lead. My documentation, my lawyer's advice, and my unwavering stance had created a shield I didn't know I could build in such a short time. In the days that followed, the harassment slowly diminished. Karen still lurked on the periphery, offering thinly veiled suggestions about community harmony, But her influence had limits. I reinforced my boundaries clearly, and neighbors who had once complied with her tactics now seemed reluctant to get involved. Living in the house again felt like reclaiming my life. I could finally enjoy my home without the constant anxiety of someone policing my every action. I realized that buying a house is more than a financial investment. It's about claiming a space where you can live freely without fear of arbitrary power. Karen's obsession taught me one critical lesson. Standing your ground matters. Documentation, legal knowledge, and clear boundaries aren't just tools, they are armor in the face of intimidation. No amount of social pressure can substitute for knowing your rights and refusing to be bullied. Ultimately, I didn't just survive the ordeal, I thrived. My home, my sanctuary, remained mine. And Karen? She learned, as did I, that fear loses its power the moment you refuse to submit to it. Owning a home comes with responsibility, but it also comes with one truth. Your boundaries are yours to protect, and sometimes protecting them is the only way to truly live in peace.